Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted to be talking about a project on this episode called Background Noise. If you heard something in the background, that's probably what it was. And talking with creators John Hazard and Lisa Burdige on this episode. John and Lisa, Lisa and John, welcome.
Hey, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for thanking me and thank you again. I have a few questions that we can roam through and we can of course add in anything that we might be missing. I've seen the Kickstarter page. I love the style that I'm seeing. I believe this is a cartoon version of the two of you floating on the couch over John's head. Is this right?
Well, that's the idea, yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. So there is some real life that is being fused into the comic.
It is a diary comic. So
Yes.
it's mostly real, except, that like the cat talks and our Roomba talks and seasons like spring and fall are personified. And so there's a little fantasy mixed in,
Hmm.
but skeleton of it is things that actually happen to us.
I love the true to life comic. Love it. Yeah. What drew you into the world of comics? What got you into this medium of storytelling?
Uh,
Why don't you go, John?
I'll go first. Okay.
Mhm.
I have always been into comics pretty much. It started with looking at the newspaper comics with my mom when I was little, and then a few cousins had comic books, but it was really Mad Magazine that first got me really excited discovering that, like, in like the local corner store. Mad Magazine was really like one of the pioneering things in American comedy that
Hmm.
really established like satirizing pop culture in the moment. Saturday Night Live like owes a lot to Mad Magazine. And as a kid, it just like was amazing to me that you could comment on the world, things I understood and things I didn't understand in comics, but they also made like stupid poopy jokes. Um, but then I shortly after that discovered like superheroes, and when I was a kid, I wanted to be an X-Man, and was drawing because I always drew. So I started drawing my own comics for like the neighborhood kids and things. And I I had I hadn't really thought about being a comic artist. I don't know if this is like a separate question, but
It's okay.
well, I mean, it's always been something that I've done. It took me a
Hmm.
while to find my way to it,
I believe
to actually.
Nickelodeon is part of the story. Shredder.
I, I, Nickelodeon is part of the story. I worked at Nickelodeon Online for 10 years. And while I was there, I tooled around with comics a bit. I did a newspaper comic strip for a couple of years, and some other things, but knew I never really knew how to really get myself into comics. I never knew how to make it work for me. And then web comics came along, P versus P and other comics like that. And I realized that this is like a model that works for me. Like you don't have to do a whole book because I would want to draw for Marvel and I had a few close calls, but it never happened. And I would try to draw things for my own on my own, but they would always get too complex, and then I would abandon the projects. But with a webcomic, the idea is that you can start doing it and start showing it right away, build your audience as you're building the book or whatever.
Hmm.
And that worked for me. So when I got laid off from Nickelodeon, Lisa asked me to finally, like, there was a webcomic that I had been fooling around with developing for like 3 years. And when I got laid off from Nickelodeon, Lisa was like, this is it. you need to, actually put your money where your mouth is, put this out into the world.
Hmm.
That was my first webcomic, Frankenstein Superstar.
Nice.
Um, it was very successful, encouraging in its way, but it kind of wasn't sustainable in the way that it was. I feel like I'm like going on and on. I
It's
don't
kind
want.
of like I think it's kind of interesting that you say that you didn't really feel like you were knew where you were as a comic book artist because like we actually are this is our we're on our second like marriage like object for lack of a better word. And
Hmm.
we met when John was working at Nickelodeon, and I thought you were just a comic book artist. Like I think that's what you told me. I sort of believed
I did
it.
not tell you that I was a
I
comic.
I I thought
I would
that
not have told you. I would tell you I was a cartoonist
okay, you said
because I am a
I
cartoonist,
guess I thought that
but
was the
I'm not a
same.
comic
I
book
don't know what
artist.
what's the difference?
Comic book artist is somebody who works on comic books. I did not work on comic books. I made comics, but I did not,
See,
you know.
it's funny because when you ask these questions, I'm this is maybe the second time I've heard him talk about how he there was as if there was this big gap. But in
Hmm.
in my experience, it was just a it was just like it was seamless. It was there were a lot of projects that didn't ladder up to a comic page, but they seemed to be very much in that world, whether it was Nickelodeon or side hustles that he was doing where he was working on projects for other people and
Hmm.
or and then Frankenstein Superstar. But Schmooze or Lose was it was actually an award winning comic strip. He sort of
Schmoozerloos was my
it
my
was
newspaper comic strip that I did for a couple of years.
yeah, and it
Well,
was it was it wasn't a small thing. It was
I always did comics, but I wanted to do comic books.
right,
And I was not doing comic books.
right,
I did a story here or there, and I did my newspaper strip, which is something I wanted to do, and it was cool. But yeah, I wanted to make full-fledged comic books. And actually that was like part of the downfall of Frankenstein Superstar is
Hmm.
that it started out as strips which was doable on a regular basis. But what I really wanted to do was full page, full comic pages, and it just
Yeah.
got too complex. And I couldn't handle that when I started after Nickelodeon. I started teaching at the Kubert School for about 10 years, and and also doing freelance. And I just didn't have time to keep that up as a web comic. But yeah, I have always been a cartoonist. But I haven't always been a comic book artist.
So, Lisa, what brought you into the
Otto.
world of
It's
comics?
not tomato
All
tomato.
right,
It's two
whatever.
different things.
I don't
It's
know.
is there a difference between short stories and novels?
Yeah.
Is it a fuzzy line or is it a very definite two things?
Yeah, but I would
It's two
still
different
say that I'm
things.
a fiction writer, whether I'm writing
A
a short.
fiction writer, but there's whatever.
Okay.
Um, But the gap for me that the gap is like there were just a lot of years where I just like really didn't know what my thing was. And that's all I'm talking about. I always drew, but I always wanted something else, and I didn't know what that was. So for me, it was a very real gap. It was a very real long period of yes, I was producing things, but not, I didn't have my thing.
Later he's going to say that I dismissed his feelings. So I hear you. I hear you.
Jesus Christ. This podcast is getting a little deep.
Anyway,
That's
so
okay. That's all
I'll
right.
answer the question too, because my answer is much shorter.
Mhm.
I was not exactly a comic book kid. I read Richie Rich, I read Little Lotto, I read Casper the Friendly Ghost. I was heavy into that world. I was Archie comics all the way.
Mm.
Occasionally Batman. I was pretty into Batman, a Superman here or there, and that's kind of where it kind of ended. I was much more of a reading books kind of kid. And I did read fairly voraciously. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I always wrote. I had never written a comic. I don't, maybe I did like, for a school project or something, but it wasn't like my thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't really until I met John and it started to become part of our world a little bit more. I had written plays, and I had worked in that world a little bit. So I had worked in some kind of a sequential art form in terms of writing, but I hadn't really translated into comics. And I also, I do work as an advertising copywriter in my day job. So there is something sequential in making, a banner ad or, a short video. So I had all of those pieces that kind of led up. So I was kind of primed, but it wasn't until John and I started to work on background noise comic that I actually started to write comics.
Cool, cool. And what was the inspiration for getting into background noise?
Well, John can tell this story because it's
Okay.
it's his story.
Well, this is not my story. Um, uh, uh, it was National Pizza Day, and I grabbed a Sharpie and a piece of printer paper, that was next to my desk, and just like drew up a quick comic of the two of us. I had done it before. But I drew us like in a very simple style with very rough lines and put a caption under it and showed it to Lisa. We had always wanted to work on a project together. And we made up things, kind of tried to make up concepts, big science fiction concepts or
Yeah.
whatever. And they just kind of never gelled. They were never genuine. Something about them just never organically worked.
Hmm.
But I made this comic, I showed it to her, and we liked it, and we kind of like instantly knew this would kind of be our thing. Is is this picture of as we are like that this picture in our background there. I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of that is like the actual original art. It's been kind of drawn over and drawn over many times, but it's us on the couch with our laptops on our laps. You can't see in the comic, but the missing fourth wall is the TV, and
Hmm.
that's like this is another couch, but over there in the TV room is how we spend our evenings. We're always like sitting with our laptops working, writing or drawing or whatever, and so that was the comic. Um, and it just we were just like we could do one of these every day. We can write a new caption and basically use the same art. But
Hmm.
then Lisa was like, my expression should change on this one. I'm mad at you in this one, but I'm not, I don't look mad. And, so we started changing the expressions and then we changed the settings and, so it evolved. But that was the genesis of it.
And
Nice,
I mean,
nice.
honestly, John wrote the first one, and I'm the writer, but John is actually a very good writer as well. And he often will either write a script, start a script. I often do rewrite it, but not all the time. He's actually quite a good writer. And but he wrote a script, and then the first one was great, the second one was all right. I was like, let's change this, let's change that. And then all
Hmm.
of a sudden I was writing the scripts, and then all of a sudden I was saying, well, why don't we start doing this? And so I was concepting too, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, this is not just a you thing, this is obviously an us thing, and then it became an us thing. So it kind of like I said, I wasn't really a comic writer. I didn't really know how to do. I didn't know that I knew how to do it. And
Hmm.
it took me a little while. I mean, honestly, for a long time, I would write a script and John would land it with a punchline because the punchlines are it's kind of it's the twist, it's the headline, it's the thing that makes it either, fall flat or something that you remember. And, John really kind of helped make those happen at the beginning. I mean, I think I can write a punchline now, but but sometimes I still need his help. It is the beauty of collaboration
Hmm.
where you're a little bit stuck, you can just, punt it and say, what can you do? And even if they do something and you don't like it, it often jars you so that you can find the thing that you couldn't find before. So it is one of the reasons people a lot of times ask, especially in that first year that this book is based on, how can you do a comic every day? And part of it was because we were doing it together.
Hmm.
So whenever one of us was tired, the other one could kind of nudge us along, and it made a big difference, and it
Yeah.
still does.
Yeah. When you were deciding to put this together into book form, well, I guess I should say, since you're putting it into book form, what are some of the things that you hope that readers will take away?
Well, we really it was really important to put this first year of comics into book form. They're initially they're all published online, but they're from years ago, and the internet is kind of a now or never kind of place.
Hmm.
So they're lost. And so this is almost like a revival of them. And we pull them out sometimes and repost them. Sometimes we change lines, sometimes to update them, but they stand true and we're proud of them. And so that was part of the reason that we really wanted to make a book. And then the other reason that we really wanted to make a book was we had a lot of people asking us questions about our process, both in terms of our craft and also the romantic journey that we sort of went through as we made the comics, and how they affected us, how they changed our relationship, how they changed other people's relationships. And we wanted to share that. We wanted to be able to really explain that and give a little bit of a peek into, like, what was that process of writing a comic every day? How did we do it? Like, how did it change us? What did we learn about ourselves? What did other people learn about themselves by reading the comic? And so we started to write essays. I started to write essays on Medium a little bit before we even started working on this book. But then we wrote some essays that were very specific to this book that haven't been published anywhere, that kind of thread the needle and keep the through line. And, we thought that that was important, and we're excited to share that.
Yeah, also there's a lot of stuff that we've been told over the years that are very relatable in the comics. So,
Hmm.
what people to take away from it is, people could see a lot of, themselves, like in terms of their relationships or their emotional or mental health struggles or career struggles. A lot of people going through a lot of things. And all of this, like really personal stuff, is also like very universal. So, we think people can both laugh at it and take comfort from a lot of the stories in the book.
Yeah, yeah. Certainly so. I love that about comics that you can see relatable elements, you can see the fantasy elements, and you're reading it and seeing it, the visual, the verbal, and all of the things put together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything on the process that we've missed, or anything that you want to mention before we get to the final question?
Um, I don't know. We're doing a lot of podcasts right now to
Hmm.
let people know about the Kickstarter, of course. Um, and I don't know, the process of like doing the Kickstarter. Um, it was like an intensified version of like all these things that Lisa is saying about collaboration and stuff. It's it's
Hmm.
it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of prodding. I actually like had the flu when we were like during like the crush time of like trying to like get the thing ready to go online. So I was like really miserable trying to
Hmm.
like do the work to get it done. And Lisa had to do like a lot of pushing. But the thing that's been great about the Kickstarter is kind of getting the book together. Like I have a big wall of anxiety about getting this thing into a book. I have
Hmm.
general anxiety about showing people my work. So getting this thing into a book, it's just like this big thing that's been hanging over our heads for a couple years now. And like every time, I kind of go to do it, I just like feel this like terrible, it isn't even necessarily about any particular rational thing. It's just
Hmm.
this fear that's been like pushing me away from it. And this Kickstarter has like been a very encouraging. All the people like willing to like give their dollars for this project, like actually being able to see the project and read about it, and then deciding they want to help make it happen. Has really, I'm like, thinking about our next Kickstarter and
Yeah.
our next
Nice.
books. It's
Nice.
been really great.
And also not even, the money obviously is important, but also just the support from the community and, how many people have, given us advice and like looked at our
A
page
lot of
and,
people,
given us, like, make sure you do this and don't do that.
yeah,
And it's been people have been very generous with their time and their wisdom,
yeah,
not just their dollars. And
yeah.
it's all been very, beautiful, for lack of a better word.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
But the other
The
thing I wanted to say about our process is that in fiction there's like two kinds of novelists. There's pantsers and there's plotters.
yes.
And
Uh-huh.
okay, you know about this.
Hmm.
So plotters, like we really want to be plotters. We really want to be plotters, and we are just not plotters. We are such and we are at our best when the deadline is tomorrow and we have to get something out the door. And like we go through our lives like kind of saying that's comic. And when things happen and scribbling it down. And I think that there's something about that I just want people to know that there is a lot of anxiety about producing art and making art come to life. And one of the things that I think was really liberating about making this comic was that, and we are lucky because we had each other to push us over the finish line. But, just kind of like you're in the moment, you have to do it. And then you say, that's a comic, and you start it. And even if it's not perfect, you can get there as long as you start. And I think that that's something that's really important. And I hope that people will get inspiration from this book and see we spent a year making comics. Not everyone was great, but over 200 of them were pretty freaking okay, like pretty good that we're willing to put them in a book and ask people to pay for them. And I think that that says a lot because I think people really want to do things and they're afraid like John is about sharing it. And it's kind of a kind of a endorsement to the world, like do it, share it,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and just take a deep breath and see what happens because it's probably going to be better than you thought.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a great thing for people to take away, like to bring it full circle. Like when I talked about my long period of like not knowing what to do, it's also a period of, perfectionism. It's
Hmm.
like starting a project and this isn't good enough to show people. This isn't good enough to finish. This isn't, and it's really just procrastination. It's just, yeah, fear or whatever. And like she said, it's a terrible thing that holds a lot of artists back. When I was teaching at the Hubert School for over 10 years, that's, one of the things that I always was on the lookout for was uh, people who were very talented, but they were afraid to put something down on the paper or
Yeah.
finish something or show it to people. And
Mhm.
those are the things that you have to do if you want to be a working artist is you have to finish things and you have to show it to people, and so
And it's
yeah,
scary. It's scary for everybody.
yeah,
And I think it's scary for no matter what level of fame or accomplishment you have. It's, I don't have a friend, we don't have a friend who's, not afraid when they share their art, whether they're like a Tony Award winning playwright or, whatever, not whatever. I don't know. I'm not saying we're running around going to the Oscars, but you know what I mean? Like everybody
But
feels the
soon,
same.
but
We
soon
know
is what I'm
people.
hearing.
We know some fancy people. Yeah, and
Wow.
yeah, it's hard for everybody. Everybody's human.
Yeah. I mean, do you agree? I mean, you
Absolutely.
are too, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking I'm working with students right now, and I've shared this, defeat the perfectionism thing, but I'm thinking this segment in particular is getting some play in my class because there is that fear of the blank page and what if I show this and it's not good enough? And oh, look what that person is doing over there. That goes a conversation I had with a student earlier today.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me happy.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we should tell people where to find the book, where to get information about that, and where to support. Any particular places? I know Kickstarter will share the link, but any other spots online that you want to mention?
We are the most consistent on Instagram. We're also on Webtoon.
Yeah.
We're
So on Instagram, it's background underscore noise underscore comic.
Hmm.
Terrible URL. And we have a website, backgroundnoisecomic.com,
which
which
has all
I
the
mostly
links.
ignore, but it has all the links. We
Yeah.
have a link tree. We're on Webtoon, but I'm a little behind on updating Webtoon, but there's still hundreds of comics on there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Uh, and we just got started on Blue Sky, which I'm enjoying very much,
Yeah.
but we're
And
just getting started on it.
we're also on Medium. The comics are on Medium as well. And I have some essays on Medium as well. The essays are all mostly about craft,
Hmm.
and they really talk about making the comic, and they cross-reference to the comics. So
Awesome, awesome. Well, I greatly appreciate the time. It's always great to talk with people that are in the process, that are putting pieces together and sharing with the world, and so many wonderful ideas here to share. And I know that you're halfway into the Kickstarter, so I hope that folks will go out there and support it as well and get it out into the world. And may it be the first of many, many to come.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.